Hi, and welcome to What's Important to You with me, James Dean. On the show, I will be talking to people from all walks of life and asking them the question, what's important to you? Because I believe once we understand what's important, then we can build the life that we truly want to live. I hope you are inspired by the guests that I talk to and answer that question for yourself and build the life that you truly want. You can support the show by clicking on the subscribe button, sharing your favorite episode, or leaving your comments. Thanks for watching. Today's guest believes nothing is wasted. That's the conclusion she reaches when looking back on what has so far been a rich and varied life and career. She established an independent consultancy in Ireland in the 90s, procuring, organising and delivering education and training to a range of high-profile commercial, public service, trade union and voluntary organisations. She was invited to take on the role of management consultant in Bangalore, India, and spent 4 years working across the subcontinent from north to south, and then 2 years in Muscat, Oman, working with a large multinational corporation. She has been a lifelong advocate and activist for women and was a member of the first Rape Crisis Centre in Ireland. She was elected Vice Chair of the National Women's Council and was invited to the 50th anniversary celebration of the Council in March 2023, where she was honoured with the title of Honorary Feminist Changemaker for Life. She is a spiritual seeker, having studied shamanism, the Celtic traditions and interfaith ministry, and she is a HSC registered celebrant, Barna Fosha, a wise woman in the Celtic tradition and life coach. She brings the same values to each role: integrity, trust, humour, empathy, compassion and truth. Above all, she brings a sense of shared humanity and invites you to do the same. Today, we find out what's important to Liz Sherry. Hi Liz, thank you so much for joining me today.
You're very welcome, James. Thank you for asking me.
Yeah, I'm delighted you're here. Really looking forward to this chat. So we're going to go straight in with Liz with the very first question, as always, is Liz, what's important to you?
Well, what's important to me is my family and my friends, because I wouldn't be who I am without them, and I couldn't do what I do without them. So when I was pondering on the question, there were lots of things that popped into my mind, and I thought, well, what could I not do without? And that they're my family and my friends, I couldn't do without. So they're the most important to me.
Yeah, and it's an interesting one because it is obviously a massively popular answer when I ask them that question, and but I always like to go sort of one bit further in a sense of it, because people have a different sort of meaning of what that means. So when we say like the first one, in a sense of family, where does that sort of importance, would you say, from family come from?
Yeah, I mean, one of your other questions was who inspired me. And I really pondered on that quite a bit, and I thought of lots of people. But my grandmother, my mother's mother, inspired me, and I didn't know. I didn't know she inspired me.
Yeah.
And I only found it out in my adult life, so I never had a chance to thank her. Yeah. So family is really important because of what we get in the DNA, what we get in our genetics, what we get in the learning and being around these people and being around these. My grandmother was a great believer in herbs, and you could heal yourself from the land. And at the time I thought, yeah. And she was always boiling up chamomile and things like that in the kitchen, and she had green fingers, and she was very strong, and she ran a shop, and she was just a really powerful woman. And it's only when I had my own granddaughter, 8 years ago, she's 8 years old, Sophia, and I absolutely adore her. And it's only when I'm with her and I'm doing things with her that I realized, oh, my granny did this with me.
Yeah. And
so I realized that I was influenced by her without ever knowing it, It was so subtle and so profound. Yeah. So I want to be that grandmother for my grandchild, that she can remember, oh yeah, I learned that from my grandmother. And like that very old thing, oh, you know, I learned that on my grandmother's knee. You hear people saying that, but I think that we're losing that. We're losing a lot of the inheritance from the grandparents, because there's so, you know, so many people live abroad, so many people have to go away, so many people decide not to have children. There's such a, and so many people are moving back in with their parents, with their children, and the grandparents are parenting again. And so the grandparenting is getting lost somewhere. And I think grandparenting is, it's absolutely amazing. It's an amazing role, and I absolutely love it. And I'm having another grandchild, please Goddess, in December, and I can't wait for that to happen. That'll be only my second. So that's why family, I think, is so important, because I see where I came from, and I visited my 93-year-old uncle on Saturday, and my 96-year-old aunt, who lives by herself, but she's not, you know, she's a very strong woman, very opinionated, and I look at her, and then my uncle was in the nursing home, and he didn't really remember us that well, but we were reminding him of the songs he used to sing. He's a lovely singer, and he was a great dancer, and we were reminding him, and he was laughing, and then he'd start singing the songs, and I was just crying. I just sat there and I just cried, because I thought he was such a vital man, and so entertaining and fun. And now he doesn't remember me, but you know, so I could see the resemblance of me, from him to me, and from my aunt to me. And I could see these are the people that I came from, and these are the strengths that I've gotten from them, and these are the interests that I've got, because I like to sing, and I'm in choirs, and I love dancing. And my aunt gave up set dancing at 90. She was set dancing every day until she said she didn't set dance on a Sunday, but every other day she did. And up till 90, she stopped working in the local church at 92, 4 years ago.
My God.
So these are very strong, you know. It's funny that it's coming up now, because had I spoken to you before last week, I wouldn't have seen them. I haven't seen them in so long. And I felt bad about that. And I thought, I'm not going to leave it so long again. So that's family. And they're my dad's brother and sister. And I take after my dad's side of the family in some ways, but my mother's mother was the very strong influence, you know. So I think that family is so important. And I've learned so much from my children. Oh my goodness. Your children are the greatest teachers of all. And my granddaughter. So that's why I value that, because I think I just would not be the person I am now without family, without my children, without my parents, without the extended family, and particularly how my children confronted me and made me think about things that I was saying by rote from my own parents, and my kids were saying, "But why do we have to do that?" And then because I was trying to be more aware in my parenting, I would stop and go, yeah, why do they have to? Yeah. And I'd have to start thinking about it then. And then I'd say, oh, well, maybe not. Maybe we'll do it some other way. So
it's really, thank you so much for sharing what you did. There's so much in it, but I think it's really interesting in a sense of, from being able to see it from all the different sides, from the sort of generational up and then down, and the sort of, but also being willing then from the, you know, to change your perspective, or have your perspective changed by your children or your grandchildren, to, they say, they make you consider and think and rechange. But I just to go back on the point that you said about your grandmother, your maternal grandmother, in a sense of like that concept of wisdom is what I came to my mind, in the sense of like what she was doing, thinking, oh, maybe no, that's just the way that Gran was and stuff. But actually, when you really realize it, go, no, but the reason she's doing what she was doing is because that's all she knew, and it was not because of it's some sort of pretend. That's, you know, so all those sort of tricks or ideas or things that she knew, as you say, boiling up whatever it was for medicine and stuff, because that's what she would have grown up with. That's what she knew. That as you say, that knowledge, that generational knowledge, is so vital for us to keep sharing and keep understanding and listening to. But I think it's a lovely then reflection of then you seeing yourself in that position with your own granddaughter as well, and seeing how that mirrored almost your experience when you were a child as well.
Yeah, because I take herbs all the time now.
Yeah.
I don't take allopathic medicine. I take herbs for everything, and love them. I love the herbs. I really feel they're doing me good when I'm taking them.
Yeah.
And I give herbs to my granddaughter, and when she's in the garden, I point out things to her, point out the herbs, and cleavers, the way they cling to everything, and they're a nuisance in the garden, but they're really, really good for you. And so when we're pulling them, I say, oh yeah, thank you to the cleavers, and thank you to the dandelions. And she really has taken that on board in a way I didn't realize, because she had a bad cough for a while and we couldn't get rid of it. And I was walking down towards a train with her, and we cut through a park here in Wicklow, and I saw her. She went over to the tree, and I waited because it was a little bit in on the wet grass, and so she went in, and I waited and for her to come back, and she came back over, and then we headed on down. And I said, "What were you doing?" And she said, "I just decided I was going to give my cough to the tree." So she went over to the tree. She asked the tree to take her cough, and she coughed and said thank you to the tree and walked away. And I just thought, how amazing.
That is amazing. Yeah.
So she said the tree will take that. The tree is going to take my cough. And I she was 7 then. So it's like, you don't know what she's imbibing from all of the things. Because I do say to her, don't just pick a flower, or don't just take things from the garden. Be aware and give thanks in your own little way. And she really does that. I can see her doing it. So yeah, there is great wisdom in it. And if you're in touch with nature, and children love nature, and they will just accept, very quickly that, oh yeah, of course you don't just take things. You wouldn't go into a house and just take things.
Yeah.
So you won't just take things from the land, or just, you can ask permission. And she says, oh, I always do it with my hands. I don't know what she meant. She said it to me yesterday. She was picking something. She said, I ask permission with my hands. I do it with my hands, Grandma, whatever she does, her own little thing. So yeah, so it's a wonderful, there is such wisdom in all of the things that, because I call myself a Ban Fasa. One of the aspects of my work, and a Ban Fasa is the Celtic term for wise woman. And I don't mean that from the point of view, oh, aren't I a very wise woman? It's to carry on that tradition of the Mná Fasa. The Mná Fasa are the wise women in the community. So they're the women that you'd go to if you couldn't figure something out, or you had a problem or whatever. This used to go on. It used to go on with my grandmother. People would call in if they had a problem to be chatting to her. So it's a wisdom that's gleaned over the years of raising children and running a business and having a relationship and keeping relationships with your friends and all the things you have to keep together as you grow older. And so by the time, like, I don't believe that you just get wiser because you get older, because there are lots of older people who are very stuck in their ways and whatever. But if you allow yourself to be changed by the experiences and be changed by your children, which I didn't do that very willingly. I did. I wasn't willingly changed by my children. I was kind of kicking and screaming a bit, but it's like, even, going through all those experiences and keeping a because my husband and I, at the time, we wanted to be, he was what you'd call, we were kind of hippies, but he wanted to be more aware in his parenting, you know, because we had twins. And so we would go along to what was then called reevaluation co-counseling, and they would run workshops on parenting and how to parent, because there was never anything, you know. And so we'd go along to these groups, and we got a lot out of them in terms of how to manage tantrums, and, you know, just a lot about how to stay present when you're around behavior that's not easy, challenging. And we learned a huge amount through that. And I learned a huge amount through my training in assertiveness and how to just to be open to learning, so that when I got to this stage of my life, which I call, I'm in this third wave of my life, that I have something to give back, and that I'm not judgmental when it comes, because so many things are changing in the, you know, the world is changing. And I do remember a woman saying to me, an older woman saying to me, "Oh, I'm ready to die now. Wow. The world is too difficult. There's too much war. There's too, you know, and I just want to leave now." And I'm thinking, you know, I understood that at the time, but I'm thinking now that, you know, I could take that view also, because there are a lot of things to be worried about, climate change and whatever. But then also I can be a person that can be a help and a support when people are losing hope or whatever, so that there is a place for me in that. I don't know if I'm explaining that.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
In a way, but it's like not giving up and saying, okay, because things have gotten different. And I had this conversation only half an hour ago with somebody, and we were talking about they, them, and the trans issue. And somebody said to me recently, "Oh my God, it's so painful. You have to keep remembering they or them, or, you know, it's so hard." And I was thinking, yeah, what an inconvenience. What an inconvenience. And somebody is really struggling with their hard struggles with how to identify and who they are, you know? And I reminded them, and I said, "Do you not remember the women's movement? Do you not remember being a feminist? Do you not remember trying to get men to say women instead of girls? Do you not remember wanting to be Ms. instead of Mrs. somebody? Do you not remember how we changed the lexicon, that we wanted people to use different language? And now you're saying, oh, but this is too hard, they, them." I said, "Do you not see it's the same thing? Language has to change to reflect the world as it is now." And she said, "Oh, right. Yeah, hadn't thought of that." And I think that as we get older, we do get more conservative. And I understand it, because we feel more vulnerable. I feel, speaking for myself, I feel more vulnerable than I did when I was 20, 30, 40. Felt like I could change the world. There was nobody stopping me. Now I feel, you know, and COVID had a big impact on that. I feel more intimidated in a crowd, or I don't feel as easily able to get away, or so you get more vulnerable as you get older. And then I think what it tends to bring is conservatism, and that's a pity, because because we have to remember how we needed the world to change to accommodate us as women. And now there is, and there are lots of people, you know, there's gender issues, race issues, there's all kinds of issues. And we need to be flexible too, to embrace all of that as well. And all that's required of me is to use a different pronoun. How difficult for me. What a pity, you know.
Absolutely. And I think, and it's really interesting you say, and there's obviously your own experience in the comparison, I think, and it comes back to that sort of one, in a sense of being able to use your own experience of what you went through previously to maybe help others. But and then to still be able to adapt and change, and things will keep moving. But I think the other thing as well, though, is having, when all these things, different things are coming up in these conversations, especially one at the moment, in which you say in relation to people, trans people, and identifying and things like that. We can all have our perspectives and thoughts on it, but to me, and I can have some immediate thoughts and my immediate things, and you can kind of check yourself. The most important thing, for myself, though, is to be open and to be curious. Because the truth is, it's not really affecting me. It's maybe affecting the way I'm thinking about stuff. It's maybe reevaluating different things that I'm thinking, or maybe I don't agree, or I disagree, or I'm not sure. But it's almost in those moments to kind of go, to keep questioning myself, to keep being curious, to keep wanting to know, and to try and hold back my own judgment, to try and hold back my own initial reaction, and kind of, I'm just going to remain curious, and I'm going to be quiet, and I'm going to listen, and I'm going to listen, and I'm going to keep listening. Because I think it's easy people can just shout the other person down, and that sounds it. Because I think, well, we're definitely going to go into it now, the next in the questions, because from where you came from the feminist perspective, what we talked about previously, and the parallels that you kind of were saying there, I'm sure you experienced it going back to where it was into was it the 70s or whatever, when 80s, when you were the forefront of that movement in Ireland. The easiest thing would be, everyone, if you would just be quiet, everything else would be fine and stay it is. But as you say, everything keeps changing.
It's a compliment. It's a compliment, Liz, for men to whistle at you on the street. It's a compliment for them to slap you on the bum and say how gorgeous you are.
Yeah.
It's a compliment. Do you not understand? Do you not get it? And so it's really what I was asked earlier was, there's a growth now in women's circles, which I run a women's circle myself. And I was thinking back to the 70s and 80s, and we ran consciousness raising groups then. That's what we called them.
Okay.
And it was where we came together to have these discussions. Well, is it okay? Is it okay for a man to do that? Is it okay? Or how do we feel if somebody says something? Or how do we feel when I make a suggestion and nobody notices, and a man says the very same thing 10 minutes later, and everybody says, oh, what a brilliant idea. And it was, it was about us raising our own consciousness about what we felt was okay and what wasn't. And now it's in the women's circles, they're a bit different in the sense that it can be about situations that arise that are difficult, but it is about meditation and sharing how, if you like, more esoteric kind of things. But there is always a place for, I'm having this problem at the moment, or this is really worrying me, or whatever. But it just reminds me of that time when, we were scrabbling around in the dark in Ireland because we had no way of, we were looking to the UK and we were looking to America and seeing what are they, and then there were all these books, Nancy Friday and, The Feminine Mystique, and all the, I just can't think of her name right now. The Australian woman, Germaine Greer, who was great fun, and so we were looking to try and figure all this out for ourselves. How does this impact me, and is it okay? And it's all coming, it never goes away, because it's all coming up at Russell Brand now. It's all there again, is the things he was saying about women. And, I'm not saying pro or anti Russell Brand. I'm just saying that the same issues are coming to light. Is it okay to speak about women or men or children in this way? And how it's, sure, he's only a lad, and it's it's supported by monopolies, huge wealthy organizations supporting it and encouraging it and promoting it. And you say to yourself, God, here we are in the 21st century, and these were the things that we were. I mean, I was really annoyed. I was really annoyed by Ryanair, and I didn't want to say anything about it because they love getting publicity. But they had an ad recently about dump the children with granny and head off to the Azores or whatever it was, you know. And I was thinking, is that okay to say that? Dump the children with granny. And then the next one was, oh, he has to go and play his golf. Men have to play their golf. And I'm thinking to myself, is this really 2023?
Yeah.
Or but these were things that we were in the 70s and 80s were saying, you can't say that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's like it creeps back in, and then people say, oh, you're, you know, the same thing happens. Oh, you're being too picky, and you know, it's only a bit of fun, and what's wrong with you? And then I start to think, well, maybe I should keep quiet, and you know, because you start to feel like you're just being awkward, you're just being a pain, being a pain.
Yeah, but I think, we'll come back in a sense to the moderns, what's current at the moment, because I think definitely there's a thing in language, and this is what I think people when we're talking about things where they say, oh, it's just to do with language, or they say it's free speech, or they say, oh, the terms that are just thrown around now, whether it be woke or whether you can't be offensive, and all these sorts of, again, to skirt around the edge and kind of to legitimize whatever I want to be able to say. And they'll say, it's just words, nothing can come of it. And that's it. You know, it's just at this level. However, in my opinion, for what I've seen or read or heard and things, is people forget that language isn't something just done in itself. It creates a certain, it filters into culture. You know, thoughts lead into feelings, or feelings lead into thoughts lead into behaviors, behavior leads into action. And if you have enough of this thing repeated, then behaviors become in a different way. Now, I want to take it back, because not just in relation to what you were doing in the 70s and 80s, in sense of having these discussions with women and thinking of what could be said and not said. And I really want to talk about, you were at the forefront in Ireland of that movement, and in relation to what we're setting up, because it's mad to think of now, but when back at that time, there wasn't things like the rape crisis centers. There weren't things like those places for women. So in its most extreme form, language is one thing, but in its most extreme form of what was happening to women, or the position that women were finding themselves in, I still think you can filter it back to these behaviors. It does lead to, in the end, the most horrific things. So I would really love, because I knew you talked about it before, but like, you know, more in a sense of, it wasn't just discussions, what you were doing back then. It was really a movement, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, it was. We had a march, bring back the night?
Yeah.
I don't think it was. I'm trying to think of the Reclaim the Night.
Yeah.
Reclaim the Night. And that was a huge march in Dublin, and I remember getting involved and wanting to be involved in this change. And, you know, hadn't really thought about rape and sexual violence so much. And then I began to really think about it. And again, my consciousness was raised about how I didn't want to walk down the street at night by myself, or I was always careful, you know, in how I was around men. But it took that consciousness raising to make me see that. And so a group of us, there were only about 10 or 12 of us, we used to meet we were given this flat, as we called it then, in Pembroke Road at the top of an old house there. I often, when I pass it, I think about it. And we had a telephone there, and we set ourselves up as a proper group, and we were arguing the toss about our policy document and how we wanted to, you know, we were a collective and we wanted to share. The chair would be rotating, and we wanted to set it up as a very feminist group and very egalitarian. And some fantastic women, you know, were part of that that group, you know, with just amazing women. And kind of, I don't want to start naming them all because I'll forget somebody, but it was just brilliant. It was one of the best times of my life. But what we used to do is get calls, you know, somebody would stay in the apartment and we'd take calls, and we'd go out at night and meet people. Very, very dangerous. You know, we didn't know what we would come up against, or we didn't think of that. And then we changed it to, we would go home and we'd be on call. So when you'd ring up the number for the Rape Crisis Centre, you'd get directed to whoever was on call that night, which, if it was me, but we'd go to bed and, you know, hope that the phone wouldn't ring during the night. But often the guards would ring thinking that we were sitting up all night and they'd want to chat.
Right.
So they would be working through the night. They would ask lots of questions about rape and about, you know, because they weren't educated. You know, this was before there was any training for the guards around rape and sexual abuse and domestic abuse. They were at a loss as well. And so they'd be ringing up asking lots of questions too. So it was really, really, a really interesting time, you know, and then talking about being influenced by people. The National Women's Council was called the Council for the Status of Women then, because this woman, amazing woman called Ďeithla Beer, she did some research on the status of women in Ireland, and it was called the Beer Report after her. And she presented this to the government, and so the government decided they were going to fund a group to improve the lot of women, if you like, and that became what was called the Council for the Status of Women. And that again was amazing, because I remember clearly going along as a representative of the Rape Crisis Centre to the council, and they were all old, what I considered old women. And in those days they wore hairnets. And but honestly, I was completely blown away by these women. Hilda Tweedy and Nora Brown really stand out. There was some just amazing women, and I learned so much from them. But initially, I saw myself as the radical. You know, these were conservative women. This is the way I was seeing it. And I was coming in the cheek of me, really, you know, I was in my 20s. And I was coming in there as, we're the radical Rape Crisis Centre, and we, you know, blah, 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 blah. And these women were just way ahead of the posse in so many ways. And it was just great. You know, I learned so much. And they were the best years of my life, really, looking back. And being a member, you know, going along as a representative. And then I was elected vice chair. And the groups just grew and grew as an umbrella body to encourage and there were all these, it was like popcorn. You know, all these groups started to pop up. Women's Aid, and of course Anne Connolly had set up the Well Women's Centre, and I used to work in the Well Women's Centre as well. And the AIM, Family Law Reform, Cherish, for single mothers, Women's Aid. All of these groups started to pop up, and we were trying to get them all under the umbrella of the National Women's Council, so that we could form a lobby group, and a strong lobby group for women's issues. So that was really exciting, getting to know all of these different groups of women, and being a part of something really, really important. You know, so we celebrated 50 years, the 50th anniversary of the National Women's Council in March in the Áras an Uachtaráin. And it was just wonderful. And just seeing all these women that I hadn't seen for years and years, and just remembering the excitement of all of that, the excitement of that popping up, a new group and a new group and a new group, and travellers women were getting involved, and lesbian groups, and, you know, it just all started happening over, you know, they'd always been there, but there was just a movement of activity that seemed to really, in the 70s, that really started to take hold and move. And that was just incredible. Like, it was incredibly, and I just loved working with women. I mean, it was very challenging as well. We all didn't get on, and we'd lots of arguments and fights about things, but I just loved being in that environment of all these women. I just loved it, and putting forward our, you know, our demands to, you know, to the government, and saying we need more money and we need this and we need that, and just to see that just to be there at the, it wasn't the very, I wasn't there at the very beginnings, that Detective Bureau report happened before me, but just coming in early and just seeing the growth and what was happening, and how important it was, and how important it was for us all to be together and to be shared, even though we didn't agree. It didn't matter. We were all together in this, you know. And so that was a wonderful time. It really was. And I look back with great affection on those days. And I learned a tremendous amount. Like, I was learning. It was the greatest laboratory you could ever be in, because we were all learning together.
Yeah.
You
and
know?
I think that's a really sort of you know, powerful point to sort of highlight in that regard. When anyone is in, you know, in those sorts of groups or in those sorts of big collectives and big movements, is I think where people can get sort of turned off, or they can get disappointed or get frustrated, is thinking that everyone has to agree. And that's the complete opposite of, really, hopefully you can agree on the outcomes, or the sort of reasons why you're there, to make essentially it better, to improve, to add. You know, there's still always going to be you say people aren't going to get on, people are going to have slightly disagreements, but if there's a genuine some sort of consensus of path, or consensus of vision, then all those sort of disagreements can still get to where everyone wants to get to. And it's
and it was challenging. It was hard. It was very hard, because sometimes it'd be quite big blow-ups, you know. But I mean, that all lent itself to the growth and the learning, and, you know, how we could be a bit more what's the word? I remember hearing somebody on the radio last week saying that, a guy from the UN saying that the Irish are the best negotiators that they have in the UN, and they want more of them. And I was thinking of that when you know, in those days, how we managed to negotiate, you know, and how we managed to deal with the conflicts, and to be okay about them, you know, saying, well, and not to be, you know, it was difficult not to take things personally, because we were young. And, you know, we weren't, I can only speak for myself, I can't say we, but for me, I wasn't raised with this very, what would I call it? A way of navigating when somebody is really on the other side of the fence from where I'm at. And so I was learning all the time and making loads of mistakes. But as I say, it was a wonderful training ground, and how to still be okay about those people, even though they were saying, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. And,
for sure.
That's a load of rubbish, you know. And you go, oh God, I don't know what I'm going to do about this, you know. But because we were getting so much of it outside from, you know, from random groups who were saying, you know, these feminists, you know, they're just men haters, and they, you know, they just want everything for themselves. Because we had a common, I mean, we understood that patriarchy oppressed everybody, men and women. But we were dealing with this in our everyday lives of not being treated with respect, or being shouted down, or being, you know, just being treated very disrespectfully. So we had that in common. So there was a huge commonality, because we were women.
100%.
And that was, you know, I think that overcame a lot. But it certainly wasn't all sisters together, hand in hand, singing "Kumbaya." That wasn't going on at all.
For sure. But I think that's a great point to sort of, as you say, to share. It's like, you know what, thing, and it's the same at the moment, and say any social change, any societal thing that's where there's debate or change going on, it's like, but if the debate is, it doesn't happen, if the conversation doesn't happen, if it just becomes the shouting match, then you lose the perspective of what the actual debate is about. Everyone can shout, that's fine, and but it's are you able to then, as you say, when people go through the shouting, are you able then to still have the conversation? Are you still able to kind of keep going and still put the point across and argue? And again, it's like bringing it, say, back now to when we're just talking about the moment. We mentioned the things, obviously it's just accusations in relation to what, with Russell Brand and things like that. But if you think then just moving away from any of allegations or accusations, just in the way he has been as a person on our screens for the last 20 or so years, and just his persona and the sort of the way that his life would have been celebrated in the way that he behaved. There was just, again, just in the last 2 days, on whatever the news stations, a gentleman, sort of two women talking about another journalist in a sort of very derogatory way that's kind of blown up over the last couple of days. And again, it's like the defense of, well, you can't offend anyone, you can't say this, and you should be able to say whatever you want. And this argument of free speech versus, but then they say, well, free speech doesn't mean free of accountability or free of responsibility or free of repercussion. You know what I mean? I always, whenever I hear someone going, or like something like, oh, right to free speech, it always brings me back to, I'm going on a complete tangent now, but I remember my first, like, moving into secondary school. So going back now, my schooling was like, I was UK secondary school, but I grew up on a military base in Germany. So kind of UK education. And I remember going into secondary school, from going from primary to secondary school, and you're given your timetable book, whatever it was back then. And the very first page was kind of like rights, but next to it was responsibilities. So it was literally, and this is so we're 11, 12. So it was the thing, these are the things you have a right for. You have a right for to come to school, to have a classroom, to be treated this way, blah, 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 but then next to it was the responsibilities. You have to turn up on time. Your responsibility to be polite to your teachers, your friends, whatever. And it was this page, and I still remember that page now from when I was 12, or whatever, 30 odd year ago now, And so you cannot, in some ways, in my opinion, preach from the sort of rights pulpit without accepting that there comes some responsibilities with that as well.
Absolutely.
It's a two-way thing. You kind of, so I think when that's the piece and because now versus what we're doing, which is having that long conversation, it's easier to throw it up in a 2-minute clip, and you can get the highlights type thing. You miss the sort of taking it that step further. And that's where I think, with all the sort of language at the moment, is like, it's easy to get the thing that goes viral. It's harder to have the real conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah. And to stay in the conversation. That's always a challenge,
Yeah.
So when you're hurt, when you're annoyed, when you're whatever, to be able to stay in the conversation. And yeah, I think that it is very difficult, I'd say, because of all of the social media, and there's so many people taking particular stands, and it's very confusing, I'd say, for a lot of people, very confusing. Yeah. And it is exactly what you're saying. We all have rights and we all have responsibilities. And how do you keep those in balance? Yeah. So it becomes it's a very, what's the word, didactic, or I don't know what the word is I'm looking for, but it's like for me it feels like a lack of self-esteem, that it's not coming from a place of confidence. So if you're coming from a place of confidence, then I can listen to you and I hear what you have to say, and then I can say how I see it. But because you hold a different view doesn't demean me in any way, or demean my position in any way. So in the old-fashioned I'm okay, you're okay way. So if you have to be shouting and screaming and having to say outrageous things to get your voice and get your message across. I just see that as people who just haven't got the basic self-esteem and don't understand that they are harming themselves more than they're harming anybody else.
Yeah.
Because there will come a time when, because I wonder myself, I'm not talking about Russell Brand from the point of view of the criminality,
No.
but I'm looking at it from the point of view, he has 2 daughters. And if he looks back on the kind of things that would he sit his daughters down to watch some of his? I mean, I loved him. I mean, I found him really entertaining and funny, and he is very bright and he's very entertaining and all of that. But I'm just saying, from the point of view now, if you look back, like most of us, we look back on things we did in our youth when we wouldn't be so happy about some things. And I think he would say himself, I'm sure, that he didn't have good self-esteem, and because of all that happened to him. But so I think that's the main thing for me. That's the main worry for me in our education, in our parenting. How do we create or raise children with basic good self-esteem so that they can stand their ground, so that they can know intrinsically when something is right or wrong, and or that can say, this doesn't feel right to me, I don't know why, and I can't explain it, it just doesn't feel right, and that it's okay to do that. So that's where it comes down very basically to me, that we need to keep an eye on how that's happening in our schools. And if you look at all this stuff that's going on, we've got all these women and probably some men outside the door protesting about childcare. It's outrageous. It's outrageous that we don't have free, good childcare, and that why are people paying mortgages to have their children looked after? So the government want women and men in the economy. They want them bolstering up the economy, but at the neglect of their children, because they're not giving the supports. So we're back to, how do we how are we as a society creating the environment that children are cherished, because it's the children who grow into Russell Brand and grow into whatever, the Jordan Peterson and the alt-right or whatever. They were all started out as children, obviously, just stating the absolute obvious. And here we are in 2023, still not paying attention to the children. The most important people in the world at the moment are the children. And we're not even doing the basics. We're not even saying it's not right that you have to leave your children in the dark in the morning, in the winter, into a creche, and you come back in the dark and you pick them. That's not a life. And parents shouldn't have to be making those kind of decisions. It's wrong.
And I think as well, like in some ways, like it's going back, and we will go into other subjects because there's so much more I want to ask about. Sort of like going back to, again, those sort of the movement in the sense of those 70s and 80s, and how that sort of, an element of trying to be able to support women, and then one, I'm sure one of the sort of elements was women in employment, women to be able to do what they wanted to do, whether it be progressing with a career, whether it be starting a business, all those sorts of things, and maybe those barriers that were maybe there before that could still be there now, but removing. But one of them, traditionally, and the sense of, I think it was definitely in Ireland, if you were a civil servant and you got married or pregnant, that was it. Your job was literally, it was part of your contract. You were gone, for so
the
many
marriage
years.
bar. The marriage bar.
So there was, there was legislation. It wasn't like, just traditionally you have to do this. There were certain things there. But I find what's an interesting thing in a sense of all of the movement that's come out of those things to try and get whether it be the equal of opportunity to go into any profession that you want, that somehow, and then you could say there's other factors in relation to the cost of just housing in general and changing things like that, and cost of rate versus the ratio of wages. But you've got to a point now, as you say, where both men and women can go into the workplace and have, arguably still a much more equal chance of their progression of their career. But because of the way the money has gone and the changes have gone, as you say now, it's like, well, actually, no, you both have to work. It's no longer a sort of, it's almost like because of the financial pressures on it, it's like one of those parents, whether it be the mother, the father, whichever situation you have in your, relationship, whether you're gay, straight, whatever, but both people almost now financially, they have to work.
I know.
So it's kind of like, how is that movement, enabled us to a point where it was like, that wasn't the point in my head.
No, it wasn't the point.
It was the point of choice, not the point of like, well, actually, no, we both, because there's this sort of cliche at the moment of like, oh no, young people, they can't afford houses because they're just spending their money on stuff. Whereas actually, when you look at it, well, no, the ratio of how much a house costs per wage gap, or the wages, like it's 8 times the wage as it was at 4 times, so those are the real things. So it's like, as you say, in childcare, so they're forced, it's into this never-ending hamster wheel of like, well, you haven't got a choice. And you say, and then in the end is either children are being raised by their grandparents, so as you say, they're parenting a second time, or they're being parented essentially by teachers or people in creches. And it's a for the progress that you obviously look to implement in what you did, there's so much being made, but that's almost like an unfortunate consequence of what's happened. You know what I mean? That people have found themselves in these situations.
But that's capitalism.
100%, yeah.
It's
100%.
Capitalism. It's not feminism, or
no,
it is
100%. 100%.
But yeah, I do think that that we're gender blind still. Men and women are not the same. We're equal in value, but we're not the same.
Yeah.
And so, the day may come when men will have wombs, but at the moment they don't. So it's that whole ethos of not that women had to strive so much to be like, what we all know about Margaret Thatcher and whatever, you had to be a better man than the men. But it's like there hasn't, for instance, in my marriage, my husband was very involved with the children and wanted to be, and would have preferred to be at home doing all of the taking care of the home, growing vegetables, doing all of that. And I was at work. And so we were very lucky that we could do that for a number of years. And he has a very close relationship with the boys, and they have a very close relationship with him. And we were very lucky to be able to do that. So that's what we were looking for. We were looking for that kind of equality where men could make those choices too. It wasn't just fighting for women's choices. We were looking for humanity and for life to change, and so that men had the choice as well. And some men did exercise that choice, and some men still do. And that's great, because that's what we want. Children should have that close relationship with their dads as well. But because of the economy and of capitalism now, yes, these forces are huge now that both couples have to be working. But I do remember there was a program on TV. I think it was with that guy. I can't remember. He was a financial expert. He still does financial stuff, but he was helping a couple who were finding themselves in great difficulty with all of this, trying to run 2 cars and children in school, blah, blah, blah. And he sat down with them, and they discovered that by one of them giving up work altogether, they would be €5 worse off, because it was costing so much to run the 2 cars, the fast food, the child minding. When they actually sat down and did the figures, and I'm not sure if that would be the same. Eddie was his name. Eddie, it'll come to me. But
Eddie Hobbs, you're talking about.
Eddie Hobbs. And, so now I'm not suggesting that it's very simplistic and that if every couple sat down, I'm not doing that. But I'm saying sometimes we do get into that rat race and we can't pull back and say, hang on, is there another more intelligent way we could approach this? And so, you know, it does require a lot of getting off that hamster wheel. And everybody is, you know, there's such a push to keep you on it. You know, it's like you have to tear yourself off to try and think, because you're trying to get the kids out of school in the morning and you're trying to get in, you're trying to do your job, you're trying to get food, you're trying to and, you know, and I noticed that even in supermarkets that, you know, they do all these 3 for 2 offers, and when you work it out, they're not really at all saving money. But if you're at the absolute, you know, you're rushing around with a trolley and you've got 20 minutes to get in and out of there, you're going to throw all that in the trolley. So there's a lot invested in capitalism, in keeping everybody busy. You're not going to be out protesting. You know, there aren't many protests. I mean, I'm delighted they got the protest off the ground for childcare yesterday, or the day before. I can't remember. It was yesterday, the day before. But also housing. There isn't enough. There isn't enough disquiet about housing and what's going on. But if you keep everybody on the hamster wheel, now I know I'm sounding like it's a conspiracy, but capitalism has always been like that. You know, keep everybody busy, then nobody can reflect and go, oh, I don't like this. I don't like what's going on here. I'm going to stop. And so everybody is kept going on the wheel. And, you know, there was something else. I remember this from years ago about keeping, you know, I remember there was something, it was something about a woman who was, she wasn't very well, and the doctor had her on medication so that she could go back to work. So everything was about, you can't take sick days, you have to keep working. You know, so women, or mothers or fathers, if the child was sick, would say that they were sick. Because they didn't want to be seen to be taking time off because so then you become more of a liability, because once those attitudes are so embedded in organizations, and I really believe, James, that COVID, the gift of COVID was people, where they proved productivity went up when people were at home, bringing their children to school, collecting their children from school, helping their kids with their homework, and working a bit later into the evening to get their work done, or getting up a bit earlier in the morning. Productivity went up. We did not need all these buildings. We do not need all these people on the roads trying to get into work, clogged up in traffic jam. We don't need it. And COVID proved it. But are we going to reap the rewards of COVID, or is everybody rushing back? You know,
that's the thing.
This is, and who knows? COVID, who knows what COVID was sent to bring? You know, was sent to teach us in terms of, well, it is possible not to keep this rat race going. It is 100%. Possible, but back to self-esteem. You have to feel confident that you can do it. You have to have people around you in your community supporting you. Back to, it takes a village. You have to have faith in yourself, but people around you have faith in you as well.
Absolutely.
You know, so I think that's for me. It's not about feminism. It's about capitalism, and that's what we were fighting too. And fighting for the rights of every men and women to have the right to make those choices for themselves. And they absolutely should be able to, without a shadow of a doubt. But there is a lot invested for
keeping people.
People so that they don't think. So they're not, you know, all these silly ideas about, oh yeah, give up your cars. I live here in Wicklow. I have no public transport here. Do you know? So there's all these kind of silly things being presented to people, as if, you know, they're wrong to be doing what they're doing, but not. it's like sometimes I'm listening to the radio and I'm thinking, are they just trying to mess with my mind here?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
I start shouting at them, like, like really showing my age, because there's always, your mom or your dad be shouting at the TV or at the radio. And I shout at the radio and I'm saying, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Where is public transport?
Yeah.
It's like, it's that kind of thing. It's I don't know where their heads are at,
Yeah. Yeah. No, again, absolutely. And I completely agree with you in that. So in so many things, again, I think it comes back to the sort of like again, moving into the sort of the advent of one of the internet and the use of way that sort of social media, and not knocking social media, but just the way information could be shared quite quickly. And the sort of political slogan is a lot more quickly out there versus on a headline. But and it keeps that momentum going. What I'm interested in is like, because obviously the sort of your experience of that's for the 70s and 80s, and I think remember you telling me before that you were, and you said the word earlier, you were a radical. That was the sort of phrase that you used. Has that sort of perspective, is that kind of, or that way of that word, does that seeing you through still to now? Do you still think in that way?
Oh, absolutely, I do. Yeah, I absolutely do. I would chain myself to the doll in a heartbeat. I nearly did over childcare. When I saw what my daughter had to pay in childcare, I was just outraged.
Yeah,
absolutely. So I still have outrage. I still feel furious about the way things are happening, and I haven't settled down into my knitting class, and nothing wrong with knitting, I have to say quickly, nothing wrong, but I haven't settled down into that. From my life took so many different turns, in terms of going from that to going from all of that busyness with the women's movement, but then realizing I needed to be earning a living, and starting up my own training business, and then going to live in India and working there for 3.5 years, and then working in Oman, and seeing how, coming from an island, of course I'd been away on holidays, but to go and live in another subcontinent like that, and be amongst people who seem to be very at ease with Hinduism, Islam, Christians, all side by side. And it really, this was more part of my learning about how, not only about gender and all of the things that I could see, but also religion and color and all of these things that affect us all in the world. And living in a country where that seemed to, now there was a caste system, of course, and it took me a while to really notice that. But definitely, I made the mistake of saying, when I saw a baby, of saying to the mother, "Oh, isn't he beautiful? He's so dark." And she said, "No, Mum, he's fair." And realizing that in Ireland, to say somebody, "Oh, isn't he beautiful, dark skin," is a compliment. Over there, it wasn't, so you had to, the fairer you were, and they sold all these bleaching cosmetics. Even to me, they were trying to sell me bleaching cosmetics. I said, "I'm white as a sheet." But I really saw how the caste system operated. But then, I was looking at these arranged marriages, and I was thinking, are they so bad? Are they so bad? I would love somebody, to my parents or some couples say to me, "I'm going to find you the perfect mate," And often those marriages, some of them are terrible, but some marriages that are not arranged are terrible. But they have a high success rate. Well, in terms of years, who knows? Who knows if they were successful in other ways? But it was it was another part of my education.
I just want to jump in there, because it's an interesting one as well, because obviously the fact that he decided to go and take those opportunities to live abroad, and obviously the different cultures and perspective, but even you say that ability to continue to learn and develop and take things in from different cultures, because in some ways, coming from what you've been doing in, say, within the women's circles and the sort of things that you were trying to go against, and or trying to go against the establishment, or way women were treated, things like, you couldn't get divorced in Ireland, you couldn't, all these things, these barriers, and then you found yourself into an environment where there still is arranged marriage, and almost there must be one part of your brain going, no, 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 and in the other part of it,
of course there was,
but then,
because in the newspapers they had what do they call it, there was the marital pages or something, can't remember, in the newspapers, and they had, fair 35-year-old man,
wow,
PhD, CBD, LPH, blah, 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 millions of letters after his name, looking for fair engineer with, wow. It was really interesting to read them, and of course, my initial reaction when I arrived was, oh my God, this is awful. This is terrible. Imagine doing this. But I didn't, I softened on it.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that it's a brilliant idea.
No.
I'm saying what I was realizing was I was bringing these Western notions and saying, oh, your way couldn't be right. Yeah. Knowing that our Western ways were so bad as well. Like, we didn't have great successes. We divorce all over the shop. And then, going there and thinking, oh, well, you're not doing it right. And then coming away thinking, who knows?
Yeah. Coming
away with it could be better. Who knows? There's as I get older, I started out in life black and white. Black and white. Oh my God, there was no gray. And if you presented me with gray, I would convince you it was black and white. But it got grayer and grayer and grayer. The more I learned. And then I began to see that, why not? That this will work for some people, it won't work for other people, just like our marriages work for some and not for others. And I could see that there was a big fight, because a lot of these young men and women were working for Microsoft, for Goldman Sachs. I was in Bangalore, which is the Silicon Valley of India. So all the multinationals were there. So all these young people were going in there and starting to earn money, and earn much more than their parents ever earned. And the women were wearing their jeans. They weren't wearing their saris to work. They were wearing jeans and whatever. And so their attitudes were changing. Yeah. And they were saying, oh no, I'm not going to go for the arranged marriage. I've met this guy and I want him. Things were changing, that was in 2005 in India. And I could see a real shift starting to take place, and women were starting to rock the boat in a way they hadn't, because they were, Eve baiting was one of the terms that was, there were terrible attacks on women, terrible. And they called it Eve baiting, where they would, I saw a policeman try to hit a young woman with a truncheon because she was chatting to a young man. And I just went and stood beside the policeman, because I thought, I'm not going to say anything, but I'm going to make sure I'm standing here. And so he had his hand on the truncheon, but I could see he was too afraid to raise it while I was standing there. And then I was near my office, and I called people from the office to come out, and they stood there as well. Nobody said anything to him. We just stood there. And then this guy came out of the office who spoke Hindi, and he asked the policeman. The policeman said she shouldn't have been talking to the young boy. They were in church, and they should have gone their separate ways. And I just said to her, get on your bike and cycle fast. And I don't think she understood what I was saying, but I was gesticulating to her, go. And so she went off on her bike. But that was only one incident that I was able to prevent, if you like, by just being white and standing there as a witness. But there was that was going on wholesale. And the other thing that was happening as well, where a lot of women were prostituting themselves to feed the family, and then when they got too old, the husbands threw them away, threw them out.
Gosh.
So there were really, I saw really, really horrible things, and then I saw this other side of the young women and men coming into these multinationals and being completely, again, their consciousness raised in a way that sometimes wasn't so good, but in other ways they were seeing how the other half lived and how things were done in other countries. So it was fascinating. It was fascinating, and so I wouldn't say one thing is better than another.
No,
I'd say give it a bash. Yeah. And if it doesn't work for you, it's where the families are forcing the young people into this, of course, and they're desperately opposed. That is terrible. But we've had arranged marriages in Ireland too, where you had to, if you had a farm, and I'm talking about now, my parents' time. But, if you had land, you were expected by your parents to marry somebody else's land and merge the farms, so the Ballroom of Romance was a case in point. It was a film that was made with Brenda Fricker years and years ago, and that was the theme of it.
Yeah.
But so we had it here. It's like, and lots of countries did. So it's just still very much a part of life there. And it's the same. It was the same in Oman as well. They had arranged marriages too.
Yeah.
So, but I could see as well that there were a lot of Omani men looking for Western wives. That was happening a lot while I was there, because there were a lot of young teachers coming in to teach English and all. And I could see there was a move from the Omani men to get involved with these women. And that was really interesting as well, chatting to them about their ways of seeing all of that. It was just fascinating, really fascinating.
Okay. No, I mean, it's like, because it's an amazing sort of, I'm sure, where everything else, just those countries to be in, so different culturally, so different in a sense of just, physically, landscape, from Ireland to India and Oman, but I'm interested as well in one sense of and I think this maybe comes back to what you've been talking earlier about, things like the self-esteem piece, in a sense of like, for yourself to make the decision to go over there and work in those countries, was it an easy decision, or what was the sort of thing? Because like doing something like that again, maybe it comes back to that word radical. I don't know. I don't know. But like, was it like, to make that decision to go and like, work abroad and effectively live abroad? What was it you thought of, like, the thing was like, I'm going to do it?
Yeah. Am I right? I'm adventurous and terrified.
Okay.
So I am adventurous, but I'm always scared. And so the terror doesn't stop me doing it. But I rattle my way along, so it's not like some people said, oh, you're very brave, and I couldn't do that. But I think people didn't realize that I was scared. I wasn't doing it in a gung-ho way. Yes. It was just that the opportunity came my way. I was offered the job, and I thought, will I take it? Will I not? And things had, I was at a stage, how old? I was 50. Yeah. And I was at a stage in my life where I was thinking, what next?
Yeah.
I was a bit bored with the work I was doing here. And it just seemed like, well, why am I being invited to India? I didn't look for it.
Yeah.
So why am I being invited to come? And it wasn't on my bucket list. At that time, I wanted to go to China. But I said, well, the Chinese are not asking me to come over. So I thought, why is that? So I could see that, looking back now, I can see why I went to India. But, and then because I came back from India, and again, like that, I told you the story, I was just in Marks and Spencer's. Yeah. And I met these women that I had known when I was a child, and one of them said her husband was opening up, not opening, he was taking over as country manager in a company, a large multinational in Oman, and he was looking for somebody. And my friend said, she's your woman, she's your woman. And his wife was there. We were talking to his wife, and then she asked me to send my CV. And I was thinking, I'm going back to Goa. I wanted to go back to Goa. And so I did go back to Goa. And then he contacted me. And then somebody rang and interviewed me. And then they sent me a ticket and said, come out and have a look. And I went from Goa to Muscat, and I had a look around, and they asked me, well, what do you think? I said, okay, I'll come.
Amazing.
And I'd never lived in a Muslim country, and I didn't. But even now, it's funny the way life is, because I find the call to prayer quite moving now when I hear it. I just find it, it's familiar to me now. And there's so many sounds that are familiar, that have become part of my inner landscape, that are as familiar to me now as the Angeles on the radio, so and it seemed to, my life seemed to take this. When I look back, it's only in retrospect that I can see that. But when I came back to Ireland, somebody was talking to me about this training in ministry, in interfaith ministry, and it didn't immediately appeal. But then when I looked into it and I saw that it was the study of all the faiths, and I thought, wow, this seems to, I wanted to do something for me, something for myself, something that I'd find interesting to do. And I thought, well, now I've just been living amongst all these different religions, and I'd love to explore this a bit more. And so I trained as an interfaith minister. But it felt like all the different aspects of my life suddenly all came together, because I brought all of that sense of feminism, and the idea of being ordained in the male way, and the way that interfaith ministry sees ordination as coming from ordinary, that we're ordinary, and that the being ordained is blessing your ordinariness, and that you're going out into the world as an ordinary person with ordinary feelings and ordinary experiences. And so because of your ordinariness, you can be a help and a support to other people. And that really struck a chord with me, that it wasn't about becoming a minister, being, elevating yourself or separating yourself out. It was about being ordained into the ordinariness of life and of the human condition. And so that was so important for me. And then bringing all the experience, it was like I put a manual together during the training, and I thought this will be something for my granddaughter, where I started out from where I was born and brought it all the way around to this, and it all made sense. It seemed like a revolution, in the sense of the real meaning of revolution, that my life revolved around all of it. My life was all about, and still is, all about seeking, and that I'm always wanting to learn more and to become more human all the time, and to become more humble. I'm not humble, and I would like to be more humble. I'd like to be more human. I'd like to not be so judgmental at times, and there are lots of things I'd like to change about myself. But I realize that that I've come a long way from the very opinionated, and you couldn't possibly be right.
Yes.
Because if you were, that meant I was wrong. It's a zero-sum thing. And And I've moved totally away. Well, I shouldn't say totally, because I'd
Yeah,
say,
yeah.
well, I'd say my children would say, no, you haven't. No, you haven't. But you know, that's the aspiration,
Yes.
is to be, you know, in the work as a celebrant,
Yes.
to bring all of that, to bring joy, in the sense of somebody wants to celebrate their child's birthday with a ceremony, or the death of a pet with a ceremony, or a promotion, or a wedding, or a funeral, or whatever, to bring the ordinariness of life into that, so that everybody feels involved, that it's not taken over in the way it has been by the Catholic Church
Yeah.
or Christian churches, that it's more egalitarian, and
Yeah.
that everybody's involved in it, and everybody creates it.
Yeah.
And you know, so that's so coming, you know, that was the ethos of
Yeah.
feminism,
Yeah.
to equality, and that everybody, that we're all in this together. And I've come right back to that now.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that was literally, I was thinking, and I think it's because that's what I think is so interesting when people, you know, and it's only when you can look back retrospective, and a lot of people times when they're in those moments of potential transition, or someone like you say, you got offered you kept getting these sort of invites to come to India or that. And I love the fact as well of that story, going back when you said went to India, you didn't go till you were 50. You know, people think, oh no, I'm at 50, that's it, I'm almost at the end type thing. You know, and it's like, and you realize it's like, whenever you, again, I was talking to someone else about this earlier, like when you enter your 20s, you think 30 is really old, and then you get to 31, 32, you go, Jesus, this is so young. And you realize, and you don't sort of fear those ages any longer. When I think when you get to 35, you go, God, I've got so much time, there's so much opportunity. But those sort of paths you take, when people can think of, I'm only in this box. So if you go back to when you're in your 20s, and the sort of the radicalism in a sense of what you were doing, that movement you were doing, and how amazingly important it was, you know, why would you at 20 think that when you get to the age you are now that you'd be a celebrant? It would be like, you'd be like, no, forget about it, talking nonsense. And you couldn't see that Venn diagram. Do you know what I mean?
No, absolutely not.
But it's through what you've shared is like through the ability to actually, you know what, to just allow that, and maybe they're opening that a little bit more, and opening that a little bit more, as you say, to allow yourself. And I love the way he says, like, actually, no, maybe I do need to become more humble, and it's not necessarily, it's not to forget your viewpoint, but almost like to allow the other views in, and as you say, to live more in the gray and not so much at the edges. And it's, so I find it's fascinating in a sense, because your career, in a sense of where you took you around the world, you said it was all in training. Is that what your sort of?
Yeah, I was a management. Yeah, for my sins, I was a management consultant. So I was working with teams in all of these multinationals. So doing things like the Myers-Briggs, the MBTI, and conflict resolution, negotiation skills, presentation skills, coaching senior managers, all that comes under that umbrella. And it was fantastic, because again, dealing with people who are completely different in terms of their just a different way. What was really striking me in my first few weeks there, I was asking some of these managers to stand up and speak for 3 minutes on any topic, just to give them some feedback. And they spoke about their children, and how proud they were of their children, and how much they love their children. And I was sitting there thinking, I couldn't imagine this happening in Ireland.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine a man doing this. I can imagine a man doing it now. In 2023, I can imagine it. But then in 2000 and whatever it was, 2010 or 12, I was thinking that wouldn't happen at home. And they were and sometimes they'd even cry talking about how much they love their children. And in a business environment, as a senior manager. And I thought, I like this. I like this. And how much they did love their children, and how caught up in their and proud, and
Yes.
so that was, I learned so much,
Yeah.
that these things were hitting me all the time.
Yeah.
The things would happen every day that I would say, oh my God, imagine. It's just, it was just full of all these wonderful experiences and possibilities.
Yeah.
These are the possibilities for everybody, to
Yeah.
do this. So yeah, so I was working in the corporate world, but in so many ways it didn't. How could I?
It sounds almost very uncorporate.
Yeah, it was. I was bringing a Western way,
Yeah. Yeah.
and and what I learned by the time I left was that they'd as much to teach me,
Yeah.
and maybe more,
Yeah.
than I had to teach them.
100%.
And they were fascinated by me,
Yeah.
by, where's your husband? Where's your children?
Yeah.
Why are you here
Yeah.
alone,
Yeah.
Auntie? They always called you
Yeah. Yeah.
Auntie.
Yeah.
Why are
Yeah.
you here on your own, Auntie? And they were fascinated by this, how this
Yeah.
woman got out on her own, who let her
Yeah.
out?
Yeah.
And that was really interesting. And
Yeah.
and chatting to the women about their lives, and I was very humbled by it. I
Yeah.
really, really was, because I did feel they were so soft,
Yeah.
and the Omani men were so soft.
Mm.
Very, very, even childlike in their excitement, and in their,
Yeah.
So in terms of, I was never anti-man ever. I mean, I
No.
adored my father, and I had really good relationships with men, but that experience of experiencing these very soft men really brought it home to me even more,
Mm.
that the problem is not men, and never was, and I never thought it was men.
No.
But I loved that. I loved and there were some horrible guys and some arrogant guys, and but the
Yeah.
overall feeling. Well, and it was South India as well.
Yeah.
When I was in North India, the men were more macho, definitely the
Yeah.
Sikhs. They were hilarious. I got great. They used to tell all these Sikh jokes were exactly like our Kerry man jokes.
Okay.
And I
Yeah.
would tell them Kerry man jokes, and they'd be laughing, thinking, "Oh yeah, exactly like the Sikhs." But they were they said all the debt collection was in the north of India, and all the negotiation and all the softy feely stuff was in the south of India. And so the north would talk about
Yeah.
they're too lazy down in the south to do
Yeah.
anything, and then the ones in the south would be saying, "Oh, look at them up there. They're all they're all heavyweights, and they're not not very nice people." So it really,
Hilarious.
I could see all the different parts. Like, it's such a huge
Yeah.
subcontinent that you couldn't compare. They
No.
were like being in different countries, each place you went
Yeah.
to. So yeah, so those things are really,
It's
the teachings are
yeah.
incredible.
It's like I love that, and it's so funny. I think because you only experience generally where you are. So obviously, my sort of obviously been in Ireland for a number of years now, whatever the 18 years or so longer, and my sort of kind of knowledge of sort of the UK, but you have the stereotypes, as you say, like of people from wherever, from Dublin to Cork to Kerry to Donegal or whatever, and we all have those things, but we think it's just ourselves in the country that we're in. You forget that what every sort of country in the world or whatever has these sort of in jokes about the country themselves, and it's really sort of my opening your mind. Of course, you would think, of course, it would be there, but you don't know it because you're not there. So it is quite a sort of again, that word of humbling thing, that is, we're not so different. That's what I think when you hear those stories from there, that they have those same sort of jokes or same sort of stereotypes, or the crack and that, whatever the way they do it around the world. We're so much more alike than we are ever different. And the sort of the perceptions that we have of people in different countries, we're actually, there's so much more similar to them than different. So I love the fact that the stories you share about them, because it really does bring people more together than takes them apart.
Yeah, and they love their families. their
Yeah.
children.
Yeah.
And they want them to do their best. And, they love their parents and they look after their parents really well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they were absolutely horrified at the idea that we put our elderly into nursing homes. They don't do that.
No.
And, the children are all minded by, all those things probably will change as they become more Americanized. But yeah, it's basic, and there's so much food. Nobody goes hungry. They've loads of food. I mean, there's poverty.
Yes.
There's terrible poverty. People live on the side of the road, but they've loads of food.
Yes.
They're not hungry.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's like mind blowing, how it's so different in so many ways. But the Irish and the Indians are very alike. There are a lot of similarities. They're very indirect in their communication, the way the Irish can be. Tell them what they want to hear. And I noticed loads of similarities. And I used to say it to them, God, I feel really at home here. And they'd laugh and, they found this fascinating, But I mean, it has all the bad sides of like everywhere else. There's crime and the treatment of women, and there's all that. There is all of that. But within it, I came across a lot of real, all going into the temples and how the temples were just so different. They're not the same. People were going in with chickens and loads of flowers and fruit, and it was just a completely different feel.
Yeah.
And I used to walk down the MG Road, the Mahatma Gandhi Road in Bangalore, and it was all little temples dotted along the road. And I used to go into them as I was passing by, and they would, the priest would be standing there and blessing me as I come in, and I'd be walking around and I'd say a few prayers and I'd walk out again. And, it was just all part of the fabric of everyday life. It wasn't a special place. It was a special place, and it wasn't. It was very much a part of life there. You just wandered in and out the same as you'd wander in and out of a shop or something. You would just go in, you'd light a candle or you'd light something, you'd come back out and he'd put some oil on your forehead or whatever. But it was just so much, I just found it all, and the colour, so colourful, and all the festivals and Ganesha, and it's just amazing. It was a great experience. And so when I look back on all of these different phases of my life, they're just amazing. Like from my early 20s on, in Ireland and back here to Ireland again, and seeing what's happening and listening to what's going on, and seeing that what I really love now is how I see more men saying all of the things that women had to say before. So I'd be listening to these young lads on News Talk and whatever, and RTE, and they're, they say, oh, hang on a minute now, I don't know if you could be saying that. There has been change. They've been brought up differently. They're not allowing things to just be said, casual racism or casual sexism or whatever. They interrupt. And this was all we wanted, we wanted allies, somebody who'd interrupt it. It didn't always have to be a woman to interrupt it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that is happening, and it might not be happening enough. We mightn't be getting as much of it as we'd like, but there's still incremental. There's still steps along the way that are good, So I'm not always shouting at the radio.
Yeah, absolutely.
But nearly always.
But you mentioned it there, like in a sense, I'm sure that the influence of the experience you had over in India and Oman influenced in the sense of you moving in. You said it was something for yourself to move in, to be, ordained as a celebrant, in that. And so was that a sort of a conscious decision in a sense of that was going to be another sort of change in relation to what you do as a quote unquote career move, or was it more, I'm just interested in this?
I'm just interested in this. It
Okay.
wasn't a career move. I just didn't want, I didn't know what the future held. I
Yeah.
didn't know what I wanted. I didn't know anymore. I'd come back from these other experiences, and I was trying to fit back in again into my old life, and I couldn't go back to my old life. Life had to change.
Yes.
And so I wanted, and then this again, like everything else, this just appeared out of nowhere. This woman said, "Oh, I think you'd like this," and handed me the information.
Interesting.
And I thought, nah, no, I don't like anything that's very religious. That was my immediate reaction.
Yeah.
And she said, "No, this is studying all faiths and none. You don't have to have practice any faith to do this." And I thought, oh, that's interesting. So yes, it was something for me. It was like a treat, something that I would go on and be part of this group and just be enjoying this new learning. I'm always enjoy learning. And so I didn't have an end in mind. I wasn't doing it to be a celebrant and to create wedding ceremonies or whatever and funerals. That wasn't my intention. My intention was to just enjoy this, just be along for the experience. And then that was in 2020. We were ordained, and then COVID came, and I didn't think really any more of it. And it's only now that I'm beginning to say to myself, yeah, I would like to be a part of bringing a new way of doing things, a new way of, new ways of celebrating all these different milestones in our lives, and having people create this and helping them to create it for themselves so that it's exactly what they want it to be. Not that they're kowtowing to or fitting in, like a square peg in a round hole. I've got to fit myself into this ceremony that's being run by somebody else.
Yeah.
Which happens. And so that's where my radical side comes in again, that I want it to be different. I want people to have choices. I want people to do it the way they would like. I want children to be involved for celebration, to have even funerals are a celebration of that person's life. And when my father died, the priest didn't know him and was saying things that weren't relevant at all. And I remember sitting there going, I have to get up and say something. So I went up on to the altar and I spoke about my dad. And I said, I want you to, for those of you who don't know him, this is who he was, and not this odd, I don't know what this man was saying at all. So it is a takeover, isn't it? It is that radical thing again of let's do it our way, but let's not lose I was going to say sanctity, and it might sound too pious, but what I mean is to not lose these are important times. These are important milestones in our lives to be celebrated and to be done with intention. Not to be, it's only about the dress and it's only about the cake and it's only, but to have intention into what is it that I want this to be? What do I want to create here? What would I like to see blossoming from this? And the same with the children, for the children to celebrate their milestones and to actually have time to reflect. Because I did a little one for my granddaughter here in the garden, and she created it. She went out and she put everything out the way she wanted it, and she dressed up in the way she wanted, and it was just beautiful. And it's been lashing rain, and I said to her, look, if it keeps lashing, we'll just do it indoors. And she said fine. And then I thought, there's some big umbrellas here. And then I said, okay, look, if it eases off, we just take these umbrellas and we'll go out. So we took the umbrellas and we went outside. As soon as we started the ceremony, the rain stopped. As soon as we started, it stayed off for the entire ceremony. As we were coming to the finish, a gust of wind just blew across us. The sun came out and there was a rainbow. All of that happened within 10 minutes at the end. And she looked around and she was saying, look, Grandma, look. And it was just like, she realized that, you know, this was an important event and the elements were all agreeing and all coming to join in. And it was perfect. It was perfect. So it's like, and I was saying to her, and you created this. This is what you did. So it's again back to self-esteem, giving children autonomy, saying this doesn't have to be done to you. You can decide how this is going to be. You can decide how you want the ceremony or how you want to, what language you want to be used, you know, because I would say to the child, if you don't, tell me what you don't want me to say, you know. So that's part, you know, it is the same thing, isn't it? I'm only realizing as I say it, that is the same, coming from the same impetus in me to have more equality in the world and to have love and respect and care for children and for nature and for each other, and in the best way that we can, to have it for ourselves. You know?
Absolutely. And it's been wonderful to hear, in a sense as well, like from my perspective, in a sense of like all those different phases you've talked about. From we've mentioned your different at the beginning with the working within the women and changing sort of the radical sort of movement that you were involved in, then in through to your sort of career and then what you've done now. It's a great, to me, from a perspective of listening as a person, then my coaching hat on, if I'm putting that on, so of when I talk to people about values, or we talk about values and what we mean by we're living values, to me just demonstrates all these strands of the different things you've done that could be seen as quite very different from each other. You know, you go from being a sort of in a almost like arguably political movement type thing to working in training, doing something quite sort of strategic like Myers-Briggs, to then moving into a world of a celebrant. But all the way through there's been the similar things of what you've been. They just are reflected in a different place, because there's not one box that you can put yourself in, but the values keep moving through it as you do those different things. So it's as you say, even now when you're doing the celebrant thing, it's like, but it's in the way that you want to have it done. It's going potentially against the sort of the norm. It's being slightly on the outside, but still in a positive way. It's not to try and bash the other. It's just to say, well, no, this is what we can do for the better, if that makes sense.
And the one link through it all is people. I'm a people person. So no matter what I was doing, I was interested in the people.
100%.
So it was the people that were the driving force for me. No matter what I was doing, it all was about me interacting with people and learning from people.
100%. One of the questions I'm always fascinated when I talk to people is about either quotes or phrases that have had an impact on them. And we were talking about it before we came on, and I know there's one that's really important to you. So I'm just going to say, I don't even ask the question. I'm just going to let you take it away in sense of what you want to share with myself and the listeners.
I absolutely love this. This is Clarissa Pinkola Estes, and she wrote Women Who Run with the Wolves and other books as well. But it is a bit long, so I'm going to try and cut it down. But she says, ours is not the task of fixing the entire world all at once, but of stretching out to mend the part of the world that is within our reach. Any small, calm thing that one soul can do to help another soul, to assist some portion of this poor suffering world, will help immensely. It is not given to us to know which acts or by whom will cause the critical mass to tip towards an enduring good. What is needed for dramatic change is an accumulation of acts, adding to, adding more, continuing. One of the most calming and powerful actions you can do to intervene in a stormy world is to stand up and show your soul. Soul on deck shines like gold in dark times. The light of the soul throws sparks, can send up flares, builds signal fires, causes proper matters to catch fire. To display the lantern of soul in shadowy times like these, to be fierce and to show mercy towards others, both are acts of immense bravery and greatest necessity. Struggling souls catch light from other souls who are fully lit and willing to show it. If you would help to calm the tumult, this is one of the strongest things you can do. And in that spirit, I hope you will write this on your wall. When a great ship is in harbour and moored, it is safe. There can be no doubt. But that is not what great ships are built for. I love that.
Yeah.
Clarissa Pinkola Estes.
Amazing. Yeah. I wasn't familiar with the work before you talked about it, and I mean, I can, yeah, it's so powerful in what you say, and I can obviously, after talking to you, I love the fact that we spoke so much before you shared it, because I can see everything that we've spoken about within that passage that you just shared, and a sense of like the embodiment. And I suppose it's like what I'm getting there is it's that thing of, from the bit that you shared there, it's like it is that whole thing of there's so much we can think and so much we can feel, but there's also a point that we need to take action. And that's what it's, and even if it's the smallest thing, people can often think that what we have to do is so grandiose. We can get caught up in thinking what I'm doing is not enough, or it's not going to make the impact. But as you said it there, it's like just the smallest world around you, and that could just be within your own family unit, it could just be within your small team are you working with, or it could be just your friendship group, or it could be that bit wider. But it's just like having
a small act of kindness in the supermarket, 100%. Or just in the or just sitting in nature, whatever. But it's just the idea that all it takes is that accumulation of little things. Of the little things.
Yeah, absolutely. You remind me there, actually, is like when I could say, like, I do the shop, like, I do the weekly shop in the house, and it's not like a big shop, it's just myself and my wife, like, but it's the weekly shop or whatever. But whenever I see myself coming up to the till and whatever, I'm putting the stuff on, it's like, it's always there's that consciousness of like, well, if someone's coming up behind me with 3 things, I'm like, no, go ahead. And it's almost that smallest thing, that makes their day that little bit easier than they're not waiting for, and it's people can think, oh, that doesn't make much of a difference, but it is those small little things, those small little moments. Or if you're seeing someone, you're in the supermarket and they can't get to something from the shelf or whatever, it's like those little things, those consciousness. Or it's like the things are like things I started doing a few years ago myself, was the consciousness of, like, in those moments of interaction with people that I don't know, that I'm, whether it be in the supermarket or if I'm out walking and someone makes eye contact with me and stuff, and it's saying good morning, saying hello, how are you? I have 2 Labradors, so if I'm taking them for a walk and they're bonkers dogs, like, they'll go up and say hi to anything and everyone. They'll jump all over you. So it's engaging when they want to engage with me, and giving that moment and that time of building up those. And when you do that, you realize how instant a connection you can make with people. I think that's an underestimated thing, that you can not know someone at all, and you can make an instant connection if you're willing to.
And there's also, when you do that, let that person ahead of you, they might get into the car and let somebody out in front of them.
Yep.
It's the accumulation.
100%.
So it's like we're just starting a tiny little ball rolling, and you don't know the effect that's having ongoing as life goes on. So never again, self-esteem. Never think that what you do is not important.
Yeah, 100%. You mentioned at the very start, in a sense of like one of the biggest influences you on was your grandmother, and then obviously the various different people that you spoke about through the women's group. Is there anyone that you haven't mentioned you think that's been a big influence on you?
Gosh, I think that loads of people have
Mm,
influenced me in terms of my friendships,
mm,
my relationships. I've
mm,
been very um, influenced by my two husbands. I've had two husbands, and they've been very influential in my life. I've
mm.
learned a lot from them, and I'm very grateful for them. Um, yeah, so I have been inspired and influenced by
Yeah,
the everyday people, you
yeah,
know, the in my life, that I, when somebody does something or says something and I think, oh, right, okay, never thought of that.
yeah.
I
I
find
think,
that's an inspiration, you
yeah.
know.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really, again, really important thing to sort of raise again, because I think there's people in sort of obviously in the public eye that I would have kind of, not as a massive public eye, but other people in the sort of field as such that I'm trying to be involved in that have influenced me or impacted me. Other people that are, coaches or in this world, like people, I'm just looking at my bookcase, like Brené Brown, and there's, Simon Sinek and all these sorts of people that have influenced. But what I love as well is the fact that I think sometimes we can come a lot closer to home to realize the people that can have a real positive and influence and impact on us. And it, as much as those people can have, it's great to have those people, the external people that you can listen to and watch. But I think sometimes we can be a lot, if we would pay that a little bit more attention, we can realize the people that are closest to us have real impact and real influence on us. And like, I think even what you just shared the stories of, and I think maybe there's the cultural thing as well, like, but um, the stories from India in a sense of those people and sort of like the love of their family, and it comes back to where we started from the very beginning of the conversation. You know, they can have so much of a positivity on us, and you think sometimes we don't have to look that far. They're right there in front of us. That those
Yeah.
and I think sometimes we can maybe dismiss that they're actually more supported than we maybe give them credit that they are for. That they are our biggest supporters in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and our friends have, like, when I
Yeah,
think of my friends and what I've learned from my friends, because they're different to me, and
yeah.
and I've seen the way they handle things and the way they live their lives, and that's an inspiration, And the one particular friend I think of, she's a Buddhist, and I just, admired the way she lives her life.
Mm,
And so I think, because I've had these friends for 30 or 40 years, and I think that they, by osmosis,
mm,
we're affected. I definitely feel that I've incorporated
yeah,
them in me in some way that I don't even know, if
yeah,
you know what I mean, that I've
yeah,
been inspired by their behavior or by the way they live their lives. And I've incorporated that and it's become part of me. So I would no longer be able to know that that came from them, if you know what I mean.
yeah,
So it's like
100%,
it is an osmosis that we're gathering from all of the people that we're really close to,
100%.
because we marry people because there's something about them that we love and we're attracted to, and so we want that for ourselves. We take
Yeah,
that in and we learn, so I've learned from those relationships, and
yeah,
I've tried to bring some of it in to be a part of me, and some of those things have become part of me.
mm,
So that's what I feel life is about. It's about that we're willing to change
yeah,
all the time, so that we're
100%.
constantly growing. And I don't mean growing from the point of view of we have to get better, but I mean
No,
constantly evolving would be a better
yeah,
word.
yeah,
Constantly evolving, so that everybody that comes into my orbit, I'm learning from them all the time. So there are people that I've forgotten that I probably was amazingly inspired by, and I just don't remember them anymore. Somebody I met while I was away working or
mm,
whatever. And yeah, I mean, I had a Zoom call from one. He was a young lad studying while I was in India, and I met him because he was a friend of one of the young men I worked
Yeah.
with. And he contacted me recently, and he's living in Canada now. And he was saying to me, "Oh, I just can't, just when I see you and I hear your voice, and you've been so important to me. You inspired me to learn English, and you inspired me to do this work that I'm doing." And I'm thinking, really, God, did I? I mean, I had no idea. I
Yeah.
was just his friend.
Yeah.
I hadn't any consciousness that I'm inspiring him to do anything, because he was learning English, and so I was helping him with it. When we were out having something to eat, and I'd explain the English for things. It was just normal life.
Yeah.
But to see him as grown up with children, and he's got a very kind of high-powered job now, and to hear him say that, to see this grown man, not the young
Mm.
lad, but to see this grown man saying this to me about a month ago on Zoom,
Yeah.
my wife really wants to come and meet you, and you were so important because his parents were dead
Yeah.
when
Yeah. Yeah.
when I met him, and and so you don't know.
Yeah.
You don't know your impact, and
Yes.
you don't know. I mean, I was taken by surprise when you said
Sure.
that, because I thought, really? Did I?
Yeah.
I don't think so. This is
Yeah.
going on in my head. I don't remember
Yes.
doing any of that, but
Yeah.
I obviously did, because I really liked him. I thought he was a really nice young man, and I would have wanted to help him anyway. But it's fascinating. We
Yeah.
don't know. And so
100%.
I don't know who, in a way, who I'm
Yeah.
inspiring, or who
Yeah.
because like I'm saying about my friends, I don't remember how much that when I
Yeah.
met them first, I might have thought, oh my God, I'd love to be more like that. And maybe I have become more like that as a result of
Yes.
having them in my
Yeah.
life,
Yeah.
So
No,
it's
yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah, no, and that's a lovely, lovely story to bring that whole bit there to the end, because it really does. I think that there's a part of, because I think that when we relate to people who are kind of maybe trying to be in that world or space, whether they're trying to, build a business, promote whatever it is, and you can get caught up in that thing of, well, actually, am I having any impact on anyone? And I think sometimes it's almost like there's a bit of it. You gotta just step away and do whatever it is you're doing. Show up, do your thing, because you don't know. You don't know when you're going to be the person or that influence or impact on that person. You have no control of that. It's when that
No,
person comes in, as you said, it comes into your orbit, and it's when those. And I think it goes back to the doing of all the small things for any situation. It's how you are as a person, regardless whether this is you think the most important person or not. Everyone who comes into your orbit should have to experience you in whatever way you are, because then you don't know when the next opportunity will be, or like the example you said there of the person that you've then, whatever small impact you may have had or influence or inspiration, the person still had to done the work and done whatever they've done to get where they've gone
absolutely.
to. But it's such a lovely thing to hear that whatever the experience that they had with you, gave them something on that road, gave them some little part of it. It's a fabulous thing to hear.
Yeah, no,
It's
I was
wonderful.
very touched by it,
Yeah,
really.
yeah. So, I mean, Liz, we could carry
It's a
on
long,
talking.
long time
I
we've been
could carry. I
talking.
know it's amazing, but I mean, we have to at some point bring this
We have to
chapter.
eat. I have to
I
eat.
know, I know. It's amazing. Obviously, I want to ensure that people are able to now follow and connect with you, what you do now as this, you go into this, you carry on this part of what you're doing as a celebrant. We'll have all the links and everything in the show notes. But if you want to give a shout out now of where people can follow and connect you online, go ahead.
Gosh, I'm not good at this part. I have a website, and that's there,
Yep.
and people can look at that. And I have a Facebook page and all of that. So yeah, I feel that the right people will come my way.
100%.
I want to attract the people who like what I have to offer.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fantastic. And say all those The links will be in the show notes.
Thank
Liz,
you.
it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. I do just have one final question for you, and that is, what's important for your future?
That I stay above ground for a bit longer.
Love it.
That I keep myself well and keep learning and keep meeting new, fascinating, amazing people. And I've one fascinating, amazing person to meet when they come to join me in December, my new grandchild.
Yeah, 100%. That's
So
wonderful.
that's what I want. I want to stay alive long enough to know them and have an impact.
Fabulous. As I said, Liz, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. Thank you
And
so
you
much
too,
for chatting to me
James.
today.
You too,
Thank you.
James. It was lovely speaking to you. Thanks a million. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for watching or listening to this episode. I really hope you enjoyed the conversation. To support the show, please subscribe on your favorite platform, share your favorite episode, get involved with your comments, and give the show a rating. If you want to learn more about what I do, you can follow me at James Dean Coaching on Facebook and Instagram, connect with me on LinkedIn, or check out my website, jamesdeancoaching.com.